Imagine stepping into a world where one wrong move, a glance, a word, or even where you sit can set off a chain reaction you never saw coming. That's life on the inside, where the stakes are high, and the rules that matter most aren't the ones written on a handbook or enforced by guards. They're the unwritten rules, the invisible code that governs everything from where you stand in line to how you talk to your cellmate. And here's the fascinating part. These rules aren't just about keeping order, they're about survival. Let me set the scene for you. Picture a prison yard. The sun is blazing down, casting long shadows across a cracked basketball court and rows of picnic tables. Inmates cluster in tight groups, some lifting weights, others playing cards, but everyone is watching, even if it doesn't look like it. For a newcomer, it's an overwhelming mix of noise, tension, and silent observation. You might think the danger comes from breaking the facility's official rules, being late to roll call, or missing a head count. But the real danger lies in breaking the other rules, the ones no one tells you about until it's too late. Take something as simple as sitting down for a meal. In the outside world, you might just grab your tray and find the first empty seat. But in here, that's a rookie mistake. Tables in the chow hall are often claimed by different groups based on race, gang affiliations, or long-standing alliances. Sitting at the wrong table sends a message, whether you mean to or not. It says, "I don't respect your space," or worse, "I'm challenging your authority." Neither of those messages ends well. Believe it or not, there's a story that perfectly illustrates this. A few years ago, in a maximum security prison in California, a new inmate walked into the chow hall for his first meal. He didn't know the unspoken rule about tables. He saw an empty spot, sat down, and started eating. Within minutes, the room went quiet. Conversation stopped, forks clinked against trays, and then came the stares. More than a dozen pairs of eyes locked on him. He had unknowingly sat at a table claimed by a tightly knit group, and in prison, that's as good as declaring war. Now, here's where it gets incredible. Instead of confronting him immediately, the group sent a message through body language first. One of them leaned back, crossed his arms, and gave a slow, deliberate nod to another inmate. The new guy didn't pick up on it, but everyone else did. It was a warning, a way of saying, "You've got one chance to fix this." When he didn't move, the group stood up, and let's just say the next few minutes didn't go well for him. This is the kind of rule you learn fast or the hard way. And it's not just about seating arrangements. The unwritten code touches every part of prison life. It dictates how you talk, how you carry yourself, and even how you walk down a hallway. If you walk too slow, you might be seen as weak. Walk too fast, and you're trying to act tough. There's a rhythm to it, a kind of unspoken choreography that separates those who understand the rules from those who don't. Here's another rule that surprises people on the outside. Don't stare. In prison, eye contact is a delicate thing. Stare too long, and it's taken as a challenge. Look away too quickly, and it's a sign of submission. There's a balance to it, a brief glance to acknowledge someone, then moving on. One former inmate once described it as the dance of respect. He said, "It's like walking a tightrope. You don't want to seem too aggressive, but you can't look scared either. Every look, every gesture, it all means something." And then there's the rule of personal space. In prison, your space is sacred. Touch someone's belongings without permission, and it's an act of war. Even something as small as picking up another inmate's book without asking can escalate quickly. Why? Because in an environment where privacy is almost non-existent, what little space you have become your entire world. Violating that space isn't just rude, it's seen as a direct threat. But here's the thing. These unwritten rules aren't just about respect or order. They're about survival. They create a system of checks and balances, a way of maintaining stability in an inherently unstable environment. Without them, the tension in a place like this would boil over in an instant. These rules are the glue that holds everything together, even if that glue is invisible to anyone who hasn't lived it. Let's pause for a moment and think about why these rules exist in the first place. Prisons are designed to strip away individuality, to enforce uniformity and control. But humans are wired to create structure, to carve out some sense of order even in chaos. The unwritten rules are a way for inmates to reclaim a bit of that control, to build their own system within the system. It's a fascinating look at human adaptability, at how people find ways to create meaning and boundaries even in the most restrictive environments. And believe it or not, these rules aren't always enforced with violence. Sometimes it's about psychology's small, subtle ways of keeping people in line. A cold stare, a whispered warning, or even just the way someone stands can send a message loud and clear. One former guard described it as a chess game where everyone knows the rules, but no one says them out loud. Breaking these rules doesn't just make your life harder, it can isolate you completely. In prison, respect isn't just a word, it's currency. Lose that respect, and you're on your own. No one will trade with you, talk to you, or have your back when things go sideways. It's a kind of social exile that can be even more dangerous than physical confrontation. So, what happens if you break prison's unwritten rules? The short answer is, you adapt, or you face the consequences. And those consequences can range from a warning to a full-scale confrontation. But here's the deeper truth. These rules are more than just a survival guide. They're a window into the human need for structure, for respect, and for a sense of control in even the harshest conditions. And as we dive deeper into this world, you'll see just how ingenious and occasionally brutal this unwritten code can be. Once you've seen how the unwritten rules of prison work, the next question becomes, what happens when you break them? And here's where things get fascinating, because the consequences aren't always immediate, and they aren't always what you'd expect. In many cases, it's not about the guards stepping in or even an outright confrontation. It's about the inmates enforcing their own system, and they've developed some surprisingly intricate ways to do it. Let's take a deeper look at what happens when these invisible boundaries are crossed. Picture this. A new inmate named Derek, barely 22 years old, fresh from a suburban life he never expected to leave behind. He's been sentenced to 5 years for a non-violent crime, and he walks in thinking, I'll just keep my head down and do my time. But Derek's first mistake happens on day one. As he's unpacking his issued belongings in his cell, his cellmate, a seasoned inmate named Carlos, casually warns him about the rules. Don't borrow anything unless you ask. Don't sit where you're not supposed to. And whatever you do, don't take food off somebody else's tray. Derek nods along, but it's clear he doesn't fully grasp what Carlos is saying. Here's where it gets incredible. On Derek's first trip to the chow hall, he sees something on another inmate's tray, an extra dessert. In his mind, it's no big deal. He reaches over, grabs it, and eats it. No one says anything at first, but the air shifts. Conversations go quiet. The guy whose tray he just raided, a tall, wiry man named Reggie, doesn't even look at him. Derek thinks he's gotten away with it, but what he doesn't realize is that in prison, nothing goes unnoticed. Later that day, Reggie sends a message the way inmates do, through intermediaries. A quiet word to one guy, a subtle nod to another. By the time Derek returns to his cell, Carlos already knows what's coming. You messed up, Carlos says, shaking his head. You don't take another man's food. You better fix this fast. Now, here's where the ingenuity of the system comes into play. Reggie doesn't confront Derek directly. Instead, he lets the social structure handle it. Word spreads quickly through the block. Derek disrespected Reggie, and now he owes him. It's not just about the dessert anymore, it's about respect. And in prison, respect is everything. For the next several days, Derek finds himself completely isolated. No one talks to him, no one sits next to him in the yard. Even Carlos starts keeping his distance. Derek doesn't fully understand what's happening until he tries to make a trade, offering a pack of instant coffee for a pair of socks. The other inmate just laughs and says, "You're on your own, man. Nobody's trading with you until you fix things with Reggie." Believe it or not, this kind of social exile is one of the most effective enforcement tools in prison. It's not always about violence sometimes, it's about cutting someone off from the community entirely. And in a place where connections and alliances are your lifeline, being isolated can be just as dangerous as a physical confrontation. But let's not sugarcoat it. Violence can be the consequence of breaking the rules, especially when the infraction is serious. Take the case of an inmate we'll call Marcus, who broke one of the most sacred unwritten rules: don't snitch. In prison, being labeled as a snitch is a virtual death sentence. Marcus had been caught passing information to the guards about another inmate's contraband operation. At first, he thought no one knew. But again, nothing in prison stays secret for long. Here's how the discovery unfolded. One of the guards let slip a comment about a confidential informant, and the inmates quickly put two and two together. Marcus's behavior had already raised suspicions he'd been avoiding certain groups, keeping his head down more than usual. Within hours, the word spread. Now here's where it gets chilling. The inmates didn't confront Marcus immediately. Instead, they waited. They watched. They let him think he was safe. This psychological tactic is a hallmark of how prison systems enforce rules. It's about making the offender feel the weight of their mistake before delivering the consequences. One night, as Marcus returned to his cell, he found a note on his bed. It was a single word: check it. In prison slang, this meant he had two choices: either ask the guards to move him into protective custody or face the consequences of staying in the general population. Checking in is seen as an admission of guilt, a way of saying, "I can't handle the heat." Marcus chose to stay, hoping to prove he wasn't a snitch. But within 24 hours, he was attacked in the showers, a brutal reminder that in prison, breaking the unwritten rules has a price. And while Marcus survived, the attack left a permanent mark not just physically, but socially. He became a cautionary tale, a living reminder of what happens when you cross the line. Now, let's shift gears and talk about how some inmates navigate these rules with surprising creativity. Not everyone who breaks the rules does so out of ignorance or malice. Sometimes it's about survival. Take the concept of kiting, for example. Kiting is a method inmates use to communicate, secretly passing notes, warnings, or even apologies without ever speaking face to face. In one case, an inmate who had accidentally violated another's personal space used a kite to smooth things over. He wrote a note acknowledging his mistake, tied it to a thread made from torn bed sheets, and slid it under the other inmate's door during the night. Here's the incredible part. The apology worked. The other inmate accepted it, and the tension dissolved without a single punch being thrown. This kind of ingenuity shows that even in a world governed by strict, often brutal rules, there's room for diplomacy if you know how to play the game. What's striking about all these stories is how they reveal the adaptability of human behavior. In an environment designed to strip away individuality and control, inmates create their own systems of order, complete with consequences, enforcement mechanisms, and even methods of reconciliation. But don't mistake this for a romanticized view of prison life. These rules, while fascinating, exist in a world of constant tension and danger. They're a means of survival, not a moral code. And the consequences of breaking them, whether social exile, violence, or psychological warfare, serve as a stark reminder of just how high the stakes are. So, what happens if you break prison's unwritten rules? As we've seen, the answer depends on the rule, the context, and the people involved. But one thing is certain: in this world, every action has a consequence, and understanding the rules can mean the difference between surviving and becoming a cautionary tale. And as we delve deeper, we'll uncover even more ingenious and sometimes shocking ways inmates enforce these invisible laws. This is where things get truly fascinating: the ingenuity, psychology, and sometimes brutal tactics inmates use to maintain order or protect themselves in an unforgiving world. Let's start with something that might surprise you. Not all unwritten rules are enforced with fists or threats. In many cases, the enforcement process is more strategic, almost surgical. Take the concept of taxing. Taxing is what inmates call it when someone breaks a minor rule, like borrowing an item without permission or failing to repay a debt on time. Instead of escalating the situation into outright violence, the group or individual involved imposes a penalty, extra work, a higher repayment, or even having to trade away a prized possession like commissary snacks or cigarettes. Here's a real-life example. In a medium-security prison in Texas, an inmate named Andre borrowed a pack of instant coffee from another inmate but didn't pay it back. Now, coffee might seem like a small thing to you or me, but in prison, it's currency. When Andre failed to repay, the group who controlled the economy in that block didn't attack him. Instead, they taxed him. Andre had to give up not just the coffee he owed, but 2 packs of ramen noodles on top of it. Believe it or not, this method worked. Andre learned his lesson, the matter was settled, and life moved on. It's a fascinating example of how inmates create their own economy of consequences, one that mirrors the outside world in ways you wouldn't expect. But here's where it gets even more interesting. The enforcement of these rules isn't just about punishment, it's about sending a message to everyone else. When someone breaks a rule, the response is often public, ensuring that everyone in the block knows the consequences of crossing the line. This public aspect isn't just about maintaining order, it's about maintaining power. Let's talk about power for a moment, because it plays a critical role in how these rules are enforced. In prison, power isn't just about physical strength, it's about alliances, resources, and influence. The most powerful inmates are often the ones who control the flow of goods and information, not necessarily the ones who can win a fight. Imagine this scenario. A high-ranking member of a prison gang discovers that someone has been stealing from the commissary stash the group controls. The thief isn't immediately attacked. Instead, the gang uses the situation to reinforce their authority. They call a block meeting, where they lay out the evidence and deliver the punishment in front of everyone. The thief is made to hand over not just what they stole, but double the amount, as a public display of the gang's control. Here's the dry humor in all of this. In some ways, it's not so different from corporate culture on the outside. Just like a manager might call a team meeting to address an issue and assert authority, prison gangs use these moments to maintain their dominance. The difference, of course, is that the stakes are much, much higher. Now, let's shift gears and look at how inmates adapt to these rules over time. For newcomers, the learning curve is steep, but for those serving long sentences, survival often depends on mastering the nuances of the code. And here's where the ingenuity of human behavior really shines. Take the story of Calvin, an inmate serving a 20-year sentence in a maximum security prison in Michigan. Calvin was a natural leader, but instead of using violence to enforce rules, he used humor and negotiation. One of his tactics was what he called the second chance hustle. When someone broke a minor rule, like sitting at the wrong table, Calvin would step in before things escalated. He'd make the offender perform a task for the group, cleaning the common area or organizing the commissary items as a way of repaying their mistake. Believe it or not, this approach worked more often than not. By giving people a way to make amends without violence, Calvin earned respect from both sides, the enforcers and the offenders. It's a reminder that even in a place as rigid as prison, there's room for creativity and diplomacy. But not every situation can be resolved so peacefully. Some rules are sacred, and breaking them almost always leads to violence. One of the most dangerous rules to violate is the racial divide. In many prisons, racial groups stick together for survival, and crossing those lines, whether by sitting with the wrong group, speaking out of turn, or forming alliances outside your race, can lead to immediate and severe consequences. One chilling example comes from a prison in Georgia, where an inmate named Marcus made the mistake of sharing commissary items with someone outside his racial group. To Marcus, it was a simple act of kindness. He had extra snacks and wanted to help someone who didn't have any. But in the eyes of his group, it was an unforgivable betrayal. The fallout was swift and brutal. Marcus's group confronted him in the yard, demanding that he explain himself. When his answer didn't satisfy them, they issued a punishment, a check-in, where Marcus was beaten and left with no choice but to request protective custody from the guards. It's a stark reminder of how rigid and unforgiving these unwritten rules can be. They're not just about survival, they're about maintaining a social structure that leaves little room for individuality or personal choice. And yet, despite the harshness of these rules, there are moments of surprising humanity. Even in this unforgiving environment, inmates find ways to build connections, create systems of fairness, and adapt to the challenges they face. Take, for example, the concept of the lookout. Inmates who can't fight or don't want to risk confrontation often take on the role of lookout for their group. It's a way of contributing without directly breaking the rules. By watching for guards during a trade or keeping an eye on potential threats in the yard, lookouts earn their place in the social structure without putting themselves in harm's way. What's fascinating about this is how it mirrors the outside world. Just like in any community, people in prison find roles that suit their strengths and minimize their weaknesses. It's a testament to the adaptability of human behavior, even in the most restrictive environments. So, what does all of this teach us about breaking prison's unwritten rules? The consequences are real, and they're often harsh. But they're also a window into the human need for structure, for order, and for a sense of control in a chaotic world. Whether it's through violence, negotiation, or ingenuity, inmates find ways to maintain their social systems, ensuring that the invisible code of prison life remains intact. And as we've seen, these rules aren't just about survival, they're about creating a sense of identity and community, even in the most challenging circumstances.